Hello and welcome to the Billings Gazette Stories of Honor 2019. I am Daryl Ehrlich, your host, and today I'm with Ray Schaak. And Ray was, I think I got this right. I got a little bit of intel before you got here. You were raised in Hardin, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
Ray was part of the Korean War, and I'm so honored to have you in here. Thanks for being in here, Ray. I really appreciate it. So I start at the beginning. We all end in different places, but we start at the beginning. Tell me about where you were. You're born and raised in Hardin. Hardin's home. How did that work?
Yes, I was born in Hardin. I was raised on a farm south of Hardin.
Okay.
I started grade school in Hardin. I went there about 3 years. Then the family moved about 30 miles south of Hardin to a farm. I went to a one-room school there, and they call it the Buckskin Mission.
Okay.
Then the school district built a new school in St. Xavier. That was 1 through freshman year.
Okay.
When you got through there, then you were bused back to Hardin for high school.
Wow.
Yep.
So how did it come to be that you went to Korea? Tell me about in the Army, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The draft policy was still on after World War II. So when we was 18, we had to register for the draft.
Okay.
My good buddy and I, we registered. We had been to Butte for an exam which classified you.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both classified 1A, so we knew we were going.
Okay.
So they were having a draft call in February, and the clerk told me I'd be called in March, and he would be called in April. So we said, what about if we just register for this draft call in February? She says, go ahead. I said, maybe we'll get to stay together then. So we did. And on the 8th day of February 51, we were sworn in Butte. We were put on a train. We were sent to Fort Lewis, Washington, where we had a little orientation, and they give us all our clothing, military clothing. And then they put us on a plane and flew us to Camp Rucker, Alabama, where we were assigned to the 47th Infantry Division, which was a Minnesota, North Dakota National Guard. And we trained there. And in August, I believe it was mid-August, I got a call we were going to the Far East. So at that time, they had let me have a 30-day leave, and then I reported into a base at San Francisco where they loaded us on a troop train.
Okay.
We were on that troop ship 28 days. We arrived in Tokyo, Yokohama, and we went to Camp Drake. There, we were there a couple of days. Then they put us on another troop ship and sent us to Korea, Incheon. We went to Incheon.
Okay.
When we left Japan, the guy that had directed us around, he says, well, all you guys are going into the 7th Infantry Division as replacements. So that's what we kind of figured. But when we got off the ship at Incheon, there was a guy standing there, and he was writing something on your helmet.
So, on your helmet, huh?
Yeah, he said he was writing a 3 on there. So we wound up in the 3rd Infantry Division.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. So 1951, you were old enough, obviously, to remember World War II.
Yes, I just missed that draft by about a year.
By about a year.
Yeah.
Were you in 1951? Are you thinking that you're going? Is war even on the horizon? Is Hardin aware of? I mean, obviously, you're aware of what's going on in Korea.
Yes.
But did you think that the chance of seeing a war again was, or how did you think about that at the time?
Well, I really didn't give it much thought. They were, they were going to take care of this in a few months, and it'd be all over with. But as it went on, well, we were sure of that, so it was pretty obvious that we were going to go to the military.
Right. Were you worried?
Not really, no.
Okay.
We volunteered for the draft.
Right. So did you get to be with your? How long did your going in with a buddy? How long did that last?
Oh, we both went to Alabama, and same infantry regiment. He was in one company and I was in the other.
Okay.
And the barracks were only a couple of barracks apart.
Mm-hmm.
And
you assumed that when you were drafted, you were going to Korea. Is that kind of
well,
was that the understanding, or was that not quite, or how did that work?
well, it seemed very obvious. You know, some of
Yeah.
the people were going to Europe, but the majority were headed to the Far East.
Sure, sure. So you go over there. How old were you in 1951? Right?
I was 22.
22. That a little bit older than.
Yeah.
So after you graduated, what did you do between 18 and 22?
Oh, I worked for my brother-in-law on a farm out
Okay.
south of Hardin.
So you were already married when you?
No.
No, we weren't.
We were
Okay.
not.
Okay. So you go to Korea. You ship overseas. What are your first thoughts when you arrive in Incheon?
It was different.
Yeah. What way? What way was different?
Well, we pulled, Incheon, the harbor is very shallow, so they anchor offshore and they load you in boats. And here's these people swimming around out around the boat. I don't know what they were looking for, so you throw something over the boat, I guess. The garbage floating around.
Mm-hmm. Looks different.
It was different, yes.
Yeah. So you get on land, then what?
Well, we unloaded at Incheon. They put us on trucks and hauled us to Seoul. When we were on the trucks, we were going to Seoul, and I noticed a sign along the road, and the sign says, "This is Wejeonbu." It was a town in Korea. But somebody had taken a marker and marked out the "is" and said, "This was Wejeonbu."
Huh.
And there was devastation you couldn't believe.
Yeah, that's because they've been going back and forth right,
Yes.
between the Chinese and the Americans, right?
Yes.
So what did it look like? Instead of a town, what did it look like? Tell me about
Just
that.
a bunch of rubble. There was no the walls standing up here and there and
Wow.
nothing. And then we got to Incheon or to Seoul. It was the same way.
Huh.
Just unbelievable. And they put us on a train in Seoul, call it their passenger train. That was something else too.
Tell me about that.
Oh, it was a real hard seats. They were all just small,
Right.
and cramped up. And I swore we backed up more than we went ahead. But we finally made it to a replacement
Depot.
yeah, and we got there, and it was evening, and the guy they fed us, and this guy says, "Well, find you a good soft spot out there somewhere and go to sleep."
Just
out on the side of a hillside.
huh.
Next morning, I woke up. This is in October, middle of October, latter part of October. I woke up and I was all covered with frost. Of course, you could hear the artillery rounds. We were close enough you could hear and see that going on up there.
Wow. So you slept out in the frost.
Yes.
This is that what you expected Korea? What did you expect Korea to be like, and was it like what you expected?
We had some knowledge of it because where we were training, there was people going over and some coming back from different units.
Yeah.
And there was.
What did they tell you?
Oh, they kind of told it's bad. It's not a good place.
Right.
It's cold and hot, humid.
Right. And are you worried as a Montanan? We have cold and hot.
Yeah.
Did you dismiss it, or did you take them seriously?
Well, I figured it was probably pretty cold from what we had heard from these people. The people who first went there, they got in that winter of 1950. That was horrible. When
Yeah.
they didn't have the right clothing and whatnot.
Right.
But we had our clothes, our winter clothing was better, and
So where did you wind up then?
well, I wound up in the Third Infantry, or part of the Third Infantry Division. We were assigned. Our unit was assigned to the 65th Infantry Regiment, which is a regiment out of Puerto Rico, and all the enlisted men in the regiment were Spanish-speaking Puerto Ricans, but the majority of the officers were Continentals. That's what they called us, people from the United States. We were the Continentals. They were Continentals, and so there was a little disconnect with communications.
Right. So what was were you an infantry? What was your specialty there?
I was assigned to a combat engineer battalion, and I didn't know what part of it I would be in.
Yeah.
When I got there, they said, "Well, you're taking over the spot of the demolition tech."
Okay.
And I thought, well, boy,
Right.
all I'm trained to do is an infantryman.
Right.
And I said, my only experience with explosives, I shot up a few firecrackers when I was a kid.
Right.
And so anyway, I was very fortunate with the guy I was replacing.
Okay.
He took me and he showed me how to do these different things, and how to rig the explosive. The explosives they used there was TNT. It was the safest, to handle, and the blasting caps were they were pretty touchy, and you carried them around in a case that was padded case, and they were individually where they wouldn't touch each other or anything, and so I took some on the job training.
Wow.
While somebody was trying to shoot you.
So if the demolition didn't get you, the bullets may.
Yes.
Was that so I just want to make sure that I understand this. You're trained as an infantryman. You go over there and they said now you're a demolitions guy.
Yeah.
Was that nerve-wracking, or how did you view that?
Well, I'm a kid. Things don't bother me too much.
Right.
Well,
water. Water?
Yeah.
Hold on just a second. So you were 22, and it didn't really bother you that they were going to just, learn how to blow things up.
Well, the guy says, "Welcome to our world." This guy that I was replacing.
Right. So where were you? Where were you specifically within Korea, and how? And what's it look like where you're at?
We were about the middle of Korea. Mm-hmm. We were in the area they called Iron Triangle. Mm-hmm. There was three little cities. There was Chorwon, Kumwon, Pungang, or something like that. Mm-hmm. They were just kind of a triangle, and that's area. They also called that the invasion route to Seoul, because that's where there was very few highways in Korea, and that's where this train went through there too. It was a pretty gentle route going through there. Right. Korea it's either rice paddies or mountains, one of the two. And we were kind of in there. There was both.
Right.
Some rice paddies. The area was kind of mountainous.
Okay. As a kid coming from Hardin, Montana, what did it look like to you?
Well, it reminded me of some of the country down kind of south and east of Hardin, those hilly countries, other than the rice paddies. Mm-hmm. It was rolling country. Then as you got further east, in the Quebec mountain range, it was just mountains. You see them kind of like looking at the Bighorns or something like that. It somewhat looked kind of the same of
Yeah.
that country down in there.
Yeah. So you're there. What's daily life like for you?
Well, what we done, we were, in support of the infantry. When they went on these search and destroy missions,
Mm-hmm.
they usually took a demolition man with them
Mm-hmm.
because destroy, and it wasn't pleasant, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't as bad as it could have been, I'm sure.
Yeah. What made it unpleasant?
Well, the communication was one thing, with the Puerto Rican people, and
Yeah.
of course everybody, some of them knew enough English you could kind of get with them, and but anyway, just being there, I guess.
Yeah. So when you would go out with them on search and destroy missions, what were you called upon? What did you have to demolish? Whatever.
Well, if like they come across these bunkers, emplacements, and stuff with the Koreans, you blow them up. That's one thing. This fella, he the guy I was replacing, he was there about 3 weeks after I got there. So
Okay.
this is a pretty short
Training.
Yeah, but anyway, he always said, well, when you're doing that, he says, make sure the fuse on that thing is long enough so you can get out of the way of the blast, but short enough so they can't pick it up and throw it back at you.
Wow, you were that close.
So that was, that kind of make you a little
Right, they make you a little nervous. Did you did you come across? Were you called upon to blow up? I mean, something that you were surprised to see, like.
Well, yeah, there was an incident where this was in, I'd say, probably early January of 1952. They sent out an order that they were going to, they call it police, and they were going to search the area, the sector, for dead Chinese, and then they were going to take them back. Things had kind of calmed down with all this truce talks,
Mm-hmm.
and they said, we're going to, anybody who is an essential, we're going to have them go out, and we're going to gather up these bodies laying around this sector. These sectors are miles wide. I don't know if that just was the 65th Infantry sector, or whether it was the whole 3rd Infantry Division. There's two other regiments, or was it the whole width of Korea?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they were sent out, these people picking up the bodies. I didn't have to go. I guess I was considered essential. And so they're picking up these bodies, and they take them to a collecting place. And I was there, and our platoon leader, who was Lieutenant Kennedy, he sent out the word I was to report to him. So I went and talked to him, and he said, he says, they got these bodies, they're stacking up down there at the burial site. He said, but they can't break through the frost. It was cold, the ground was froze hard. He said they can't break through the frost with their dozers. Of course, they got these old leftovers from World War II that are all just got a wreck.
Right.
He said, I'm going to take you down to the supply depot dump, and you pick up what you feel is necessary to go down there and blow some holes through that frost, and so they can get started in this burial site. So he says, there's a guy coming up to pick you up. He'll pick you up shortly. So I went and gathered up the stuff I needed. I had a pretty good idea, what I would have to have. They had different types of, they had explosives. They were more like, just built like a cone. Mm-hmm. And you set up on a little stand, and when they blew that, the force of that explosion went down instead of up. So I gathered up a couple of them and half a load of TNT, and
Right.
This guy comes, picks me up. He's just some young lieutenant. I'm sure he was a little younger than I was. And so we load up and we're going back and we're talking, just chatting as we're going along. And we get to where this burial site is. It was not the burial site, but it was where these units were camped out. It was just a big tent city. So he pulls up to the tent there and he said, he said, I'd like to have you come in and stay in my tent and go to eat with us over at the officers' mess. But he said, the Army won't let me do that. We cannot fraternize with the enlisted men. I'm thinking, what are we doing here for the last 2.5 hours? Should I have been sitting in the back of the Jeep with a curtain between us?
Right, yeah.
So he says, just go over in that tent there and find an empty cot and throw your bread roll out.
Wow.
He said, I'll see you in the morning. So he came and got me in the morning. We went down to the burial site and he showed me where they wanted to start. And so I set these explosions off. I blew a hole in there big enough to bury it in one of them dozers.
You got the job done?
I got the job done. First try.
Right.
So they get in there, and once they get
past the frost,
then they could pop it loose as they were going. And he said, I'm going to keep you around here for a couple of days just to make sure we're good. And I said, well, this is pretty nice living here. I'll stay.
Right.
So he showed me, the diagram. They're not just going to dump a bunch of bodies in the hole and bury them. It was all plotted out. They had it all gridded out where they were going to lay them in there in rows, and it'd be a regular type military cemetery. And so I hung around for a couple of days, and they were going along fine. This lieutenant, he's showing me around. He's fraternizing with me now. So.
Right, yeah. exactly like he said he would.
So anyway, and he showed me what they would do. They would, these bodies, there was parts of bodies. Mm-hmm. There was whole bodies. There was a lot of packs of feral dogs. I suppose they were family dogs and all this confusion, and they ran off and they were in packs. They had been feeding on some of those bodies. Mm-hmm. It was
not good.
No good. No. And they wrapped them. They had a kind of a tarp. They would wrap this body in and lay it in there, and then when it was covered, they would put a little. If the body had any type of identification on it, they would take and they would attach to that cross they put on top.
So we were even taking care of basically the enemy. We were burying the enemy as properly as we could.
Yes,
that's an amazing story.
Yeah, and the Chinese they never picked up the bodies. They just if you were there, that's it. They just went on.
Huh.
And then same little guy took me back to my company.
Right.
He was a nice little fella.
Yeah.
Before he left, he said, "Come on in my tent here." Okay. He crawled in, digging underneath his bunk, and he come up with a jug of whiskey. He said,
That's wonderful. So did you, when you were there, did you encounter a lot of Chinese forces?
The whole situation, the big war part was over. They were just always, they were trying to jockey back and forth. They'd have all these raids and trying to better their line. If this truce ever went through, something that was good to defend. A lot of them where you had good observation of the other side.
Yeah.
Some of them observation points, we could get up on them and you could see the Chinese. We were on one side of this river, they were on the other side. They would come down to the river, bathe, wash their clothes. Mm-hmm. They were out of rifle range, so
Right.
They,
Yeah, they knew that.
say, yeah. But just to actually encounter a lot of Chinese, no.
Okay.
One other incident we had there was one of these areas that they considered very strategic, so there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of battles fought over that thing. And they finally said, well, we got it clear. So Lieutenant Kennedy, he gets me and he said, you know, they're kind of concerned that that might be pretty heavily mined out in there, and before they start moving a lot of heavy equipment and stuff out in that area, like tanks and that, he says they want us to make a scan of it. So he says, come on with me, we'll go take a look at it. So we drive as far as we could in his Jeep, and then it wasn't visible till, and we get out and we're walking around, and there was some old bombed out buildings there, and some of them weren't too bad. There was, and we kicking through these buildings, looking around, and we heard some noise behind us, and we looked up, and here's a patrol of Puerto Rican soldiers coming through there, and they start going through the buildings, and all of a sudden there's this big firefight starts. There's a bunch of Chinese in there, and
wow.
We wonder what would have happened if the two of us, had walked into one of them buildings.
Yeah.
And but the firefight didn't last very long. Now, not only was the shooting war, there was a propaganda war.
Yeah.
And I got one of the folders in that deal. And the Chinese had one, and the Americans had one. They called them safe conduct passes. Well, when you were wanting to surrender, why, you would pick that up and wave it at them, and then you were supposed to be
treated,
yeah, treated, So it wasn't long. They started waving them, and because they just were outnumbered.
Right. Were you ever afraid that that was a close encounter? You always think, well, if I would have just been a little slightly different at a slightly different time, things would have turned out different. Were you ever worried you wouldn't come back home?
No, I don't think so. I always figured,
you'd come back home.
The chances were pretty good. That's like the guys, my guy, the first guy, the demolition guy, he said, when that starts coming to me, he says, make yourself as small as you can.
Right, yeah.
Get down as flat as you can.
Yeah.
And
was that good advice?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. It's probably a different thing to, as one of the veterans I talked to, it's never good at hearing bullets coming at you from the wrong way, right?
Yeah. And there's this constant heavy artillery. And mortar fire, and more so than just actual rifle fire.
How do you get used to that?
Yeah, somewhat.
Okay.
You kind of get used to the sounds of those things. You can kind of tell if they're going to go over you or if they're going to land on you. The first day I went out, we ran into a real heavy barrage of mortar fire. Okay. And my instructor, he kind of laughed at me because he says you didn't even make a shadow.
So how do you learn what's dangerous and what to ignore?
Well, you really don't ignore any of it.
Okay.
But I don't know. I guess you just kind of get used to it.
Okay. Do you, when you're over there, you're going on patrols with them? Do you go on patrols, or you just go on search and destroy?
They were no the patrols we didn't normally go on.
Okay.
Um,
On your search and destroy, how did that? Just tell me about the mechanics of that. Do you go out? How many people are there, and what do you do?
there's usually like a squad or two of infantry, which
Okay.
would probably be about 20 men,
Okay.
and they were, you know, they would have different types of patrols like that. They would go out for intelligence, and they would try to gather intelligence, try to find out where the Chinese troops were, and they were really geared to make contact with them,
Okay.
just gotta find out what the intelligence was, where your search and destroy. That's the thing you're there for, is to
Yeah.
find it and
Blow it up.
destroy it.
Yeah. What was your opinion of the Chinese fighters? Were they as soldiers or as
Well, there was a lot of theories of why they'd done the things they would do. They kind of thought a lot of them were probably on drugs,
Mhm.
because they'd just come rushing at them, and you just rushing at you, and they just mow them down. They're dead. It didn't bother 'em. A lot of them didn't even have weapons. When some guy dropped with it had a weapon, they would pick it up and go.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
they didn't seem to have much regard for human life.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. What about on the American side? What was daily life like, and what was the camaraderie like?
well, I didn't associate with with the rest of the squad very much. Nights we would spend together, but other than that, but I'm sure there was a lot of camaraderie there, that because you had to
Yep.
depend on the other guy.
Yep. What was daily life like? Was it tough in career, or what was what kind of give me an idea of what would happen day in, day out?
Well, there was days not much would go on.
Sure.
It would be pretty relaxed. When the movements of the units came, static, they start building bunkers on the main line of resistance, and there was they would have some type of a heat in them, and it get kind of boring, at times.
How did you pass the time when it did get boring? What was there to do?
Well, a lot of guys like to play nice.
Okay.
Try to get the other guy's paycheck. But I never was into that.
Right. Yeah.
It was usually like that combat engineer. There was always something for him to do.
Right.
They were either helping the infantry with their building bunkers, laying wire out ahead of the
Yeah.
and so you were pretty much busy all the time.
Yeah. And it was hot and cold. Was that an accurate description for
Yeah.
you?
That's one of the things I remember more than anything, was the severe weather conditions.
Okay, tell me about that.
Winters get 30 below. Summers it would get 100 above. The monsoon season, you measured rain by the bucketfuls, and it was never comfortable. Like here you get spring, fall times.
Yeah.
Really wasn't much of that.
Yeah. What did you miss most about home?
Mom's cooking.
Mom's cooking. What about mom's cooking? What was there any particular thing that you missed that she cooked?
Well, yeah, I guess there was.
Okay.
But I never gave it much thought.
Okay, what did you miss most about her cooking? Like, was there a dish?
Gosh, she used to make they call it kuchen.
Yeah.
That was. Are you familiar with?
Yeah, it's
yeah.
a cake.
Yeah, that's kind of what I always really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So, what kind of communication did you hear much from home, or did you?
They
to write one?
they had mail went through.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think they always. Or the officers always said, "You guys write to your parents,"
Yeah.
And
what did you write to them? What did you tell them about Korea?
Where we were, what kind of. We were doing fine.
Right, even if you weren't, you did.
Yeah.
And what did you hear back from the States?
Oh, here again, I came from a big family.
Okay.
What the kids are doing and this and that. And nothing really about the war, war, police action, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. As one soldier told me, it doesn't matter what you call it, the bullets all fire the same.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah.
I bet that is.
They did. It was later, somewhere in the spring of 52, they issued us body armor for upper body. And what that was just a vest with, they had like iron plates in this thing. And they were stitched around them so those plates couldn't move. Heavy.
Yeah.
Ugly things.
Right. And probably really hot, right?
Yeah, they were. And they would, for shrapnel or that type of stuff, they were very effective. I don't know about bullets. They might have, if it just hit in between one of them, those plates, I'm sure they would have penetrated.
Right. So the Army got better at outfitting you.
Yes. Oh, yeah. For the winter, we were there. We had pretty good winter clothing.
Yeah.
And
so, how long did you spend over there?
I was there 10 months.
Okay.
When I was there, they had a point system. You earned points for where you were, what you done. For combat duty, and you earn 4 points a month for that. But along with that, you had to be fired upon by the enemy so many days of that month.
Okay.
It wasn't the whole month. It was like maybe a week of that during that time of that month. So you got 4 points for that. For anything else, why you only got 2 points a month.
Okay.
So I had 8 points, or 8 months of 4 points, which was of 32, and then 2 months of 2 points.
Okay.
And that was rotated out of there.
Do you remember how it felt when you got enough points, or tell me about the lead?
Well,
you're counting points, I imagine, right?
Well,
or are you?
Not really.
Okay.
I was kind of surprised. I still have the.
Yeah, you can.
Anyway, this.
This is the.
That's what they gave us. One day they called me down to company command post and said, "You're ready to go home." And
wow.
I was quite surprised, really. I didn't think I'd.
Yeah.
And so.
Wow. That's a cool thing that this is all the people who are rotating out, correct?
Yes.
Wow.
And here's something on that propaganda. That's the
safe,
Chinese.
That's your safe conduct pass.
Yes. But, yeah, well, I had some idea I was coming, they said, well, normally most enlisted men will spend 12 months to earn those points. Well, we seem to be up front most of the time.
Right. Wow, I see that your safe conduct pass that was issued or that you found, MacArthur is fighting Wall Street and his own profits. He's got big stakes in Asia, but what are you fighting for?
Yeah.
The enemies of Korean and Chinese people, the warmongers who sent you here, are your enemies too. You do not, or you do the fighting while they make the money. Don't waste your life in a meaningless war. Stop fighting. Wow. Huh. There you go.
Yes.
That's quite the propaganda.
Yeah, and I didn't have the way the Chinese scattered theirs. Their troops would just carry them up and then throw them out and let the wind blow them. Yeah, the wind would scatter 'em. They didn't have any air. Well, the Chinese had some air force, but the American Air or the U.S. Air Force would meet them at the Yalu River, and they never did get down to any of the. If they did, it was very rare.
Yeah.
They took care of them up there. They couldn't cross the Yellow River. But as long as they were on this side, why?
Yeah, they would spread that
Yeah.
propaganda. So you were surprised that you were rotating out of Korea.
Well, not. I didn't think it would be quite that soon. I knew I was going out, but it kind of surprised me when they said you got your 40 points.
40 points to go home?
36 rather. 36, yeah.
Okay.
The officers had to have 40.
Okay. So you rotate out, and what's that? Tell me about leaving Korea. How did that happen?
Well, it was just real sudden. We just reversed the process of when we came in. Rode the train, or no, we didn't ride the train going back. They put us on trucks and hauled us back.
And was that a good feeling to be leaving?
Yes.
Yeah. What were you looking forward to?
Getting home.
Yeah. So tell me about coming home. How long did that take, and then what happened?
We just reversed the whole thing.
Okay.
We went to Incheon. We loaded on a troop ship, went to Japan. We were there a few days. Then they put us on a troop ship. Took us 28 days to get back to San Francisco. Got to San Francisco, and they put us on planes and flew us back to Fort Lewis, Washington.
And then what happened?
When we were drafted for 21 months.
Okay.
We were in the Army about 3 months, and this Korean thing just wasn't coming to an end, so they extended it to 24 months. But they said, if you've been in Korea and if you get back before your 21 months is up, or even if you were over the 21 months, if you were over the 21 months, they would release you right away. But you had to stay for that 21 months. So I got back. I don't know. I got back. They gave me a 30-day furlough. I went home for 30 days. Had to go back, and I spent another 3 weeks before I had my 21 months in. And then they released me from active duty and put me in the inactive reserve. Okay. And it was November 8th of 1956 when I finally received my discharge.
That's a long time.
Yeah, well, they put you in this, you were inactive, you didn't have to participate in any military at all.
Right.
And
Yeah. So you come home, what was that like?
Well, it was good, but, I guess in today's world, they'd have probably said you have PTSD.
Yeah.
Because I didn't take care of myself. I had a little boobs, a little too much.
Yeah.
Got double pneumonia. And I was staying with the parents. And I was out when my dad got me to the hospital.
Wow.
I couldn't breathe. Both of my lungs were full of fluid.
Wow.
So I spent a week in the hospital for recovery. And I said, that other isn't working. I got to do something else, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went back and worked for my brother-in-law, out in that's on the farm.
Uh-huh.
And I met this girl over here.
Yeah, she's a pretty good.
we were married. We got married, and then I went to work I got a job with the the state Department of Transportation on an engineering crew.
Okay.
And I worked for them for 34 years.
Wow.
And then they had a system where I could buy my military time, so I retired with 36 years. I started at the bottom, and I wound up as a project manager for about 18 or 20 years of the time.
Wow. Congratulations. What helped you turn it? Yeah, you said like this isn't working out. Now there are a lot of guys who say this isn't working out, but don't have the power to change it. What changed it for you?
Well, I smoked a lot and all that. I had to give up the smoking.
Yeah.
And I didn't smoke for quite a while, and then I have one once in a while. I finally just had to throw them away, and I said, that's it. And I always enjoyed a beer, but I kind of limited that.
Yeah.
Got, the first, when I was home first, it was in the dead of winter and no jobs.
So it's easy to go to a dark place?
Yeah, and some of these other guys were coming back, and you'd get together and you'd go, and they didn't have nothing to do either. So you're sitting around having a beer.
Yeah. Was it hard getting back to normal civilian life after doing that?
It took quite a while, yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's hard about the transition that people may not understand?
Boy, kind of hard to understand. You're so in the military, you're told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Here you're making your own decisions, you're
completely free to do what you want.
Yeah, it's just completely different.
Yeah. And
you've been there, that's drilled into you for two or 3 years. It takes a while to get rid of it.
Yeah, yeah. Was it hard getting also, because you're talking about when you're in Korea, you're always hearing artillery and all of that, and you're always, it seems to me that you may not even realize it, but you're at a heightened state of alert, and then you come back, and that's not the same in Hardin, Montana, or Billings or anywhere, right?
Yeah, you were always looking over your shoulder, what's going to happen now.
Yeah, yeah. When you look back, was the military a good experience for you?
Yes.
Why? In what way?
Well, it teaches you, just respect for others, and I don't know quite how to put that into words, but you grow up.
Yeah.
You have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just mature in there. You mature there faster than you would
back home.
Back home, yes.
Yeah. Was it good getting back home?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What was your? Why do you think Korea has been called the Forgotten War?
Yes.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And what about it? Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's been forgotten?
I don't know. I really don't. The Korean War probably was based on the fact that they wanted to stop the spread of communism. Mm-hmm. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I don't think it was during the war. It wasn't always on the news like Vietnam and World War II. And
yeah.
a lot of people when they said Korea, where's that?
Yeah. Even when you came back home?
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of moved on.
Yeah.
Did you, what do you tell people? I think there's more interest in Korea now.
Yeah.
Because people went back and said, hey, what did happen there?
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope, as a guy who was there and saw what you saw, what do you hope people remember about the Korean War, Ray?
Well, people didn't seem to really give much thought to how these first people that went in there that first year, what those people sacrificed.
Yeah.
They're up a bunch of brainwashed barbarians, you might say, those North Koreans. And here, these guys have come from Japan, where they were, they were the occupational forces. That's pretty easy living there.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, here you are. You got these people, and when they sent them in to begin with, they didn't send enough. They were poorly equipped, and they were nowhere prepared to face what they did.
Mm-hmm. The Americans just were not ready. They didn't have the right equipment. They weren't ready for it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but those guys, they got beat pretty bad, but they hung in there and got the job done. When the Chinese finally came in, the Korean army was dissipated. There was nothing. Devastated. There was, I think, after that, there was only one division left of that Korean army, and the rest were gone. Mm-hmm. Thousands of them in prisoner of war camps.
Yeah. None
of that was really talked about.
Yeah. Do you, when you look back at it, and we're still dealing with Korea, North Korea and all that. Is that odd for you to sit here years later and still see us dealing with Korea?
Yeah.
Does it surprise you?
Not necessarily, knowing what was in the north area of that country. Communism, dictatorship. Their own people are starving to death.
Right.
And, and I said, boy, don't trust those guys.
Yeah. Did you, when you went back and you reversed the course as you were leaving Korea, were places like Incheon or Seoul, were they built up better, or were they still rubble when you left?
They were cleaned up some. There wasn't much building. It just amazes me to see those places today on TV today.
Yeah.
Why? Boy, that isn't the place I was.
Have you ever been back to that place?
No.
Do you have any desire to go? If someone handed you a free plane ticket, would you go?
I'd have to think about it a long time. I'm not sure I would.
Okay. All right. That's good. So, you think that the Army was ultimately a good move for you?
Yes. It matures people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good for young people to have a little of that experience.
Yeah. Do you recall, obviously you went to Korea, and, doing a lot of these interviews, I hear there's some similarities. It wasn't all the same. Were you concerned when we went into Vietnam because you had been to a place like Korea?
I never gave it much thought.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Does your family, do they know that you fought in Korea, and do they know about your service?
Yes.
That's great. What do they think?
They're the guys that are twisting my arm to come in here.
I know they're the. That's okay that they're twisting your arm. I've made a whole career interviewing veterans because not many of them probably volunteered. There were some, but not many. So I just want to say, as we come to a close, thank you so much for what you did. Thank you for being willing, and also thank you for sitting down today to share your story. Because one of the reasons we do this is because I want to preserve that history, so that when people wonder, what was Vietnam, Korea, World War II, or even the Gulf Wars, what was it like? They hear from people they knew, not just read it in books. So thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. I came from a big family. And I had, there was 4 of us in the service. My oldest brother was in World War II. He was drafted in February of 1950 or 41.
Wow.
And, you know, at that time they drafted them for a year and then they would be released. Well, December of 41 when the Japanese hit, well, they were in for the duration.
Yeah.
And I had 2 younger brothers that one was in the Navy during the Vietnam, or not the Vietnam, but the Korean War. And the other one, he was in the Air Force shortly after Korea War ended.
Wow. Wow.
So,
Yeah, thank you for your the whole family service. Yeah. And I just want to say once again, thank you for allowing your arm to be twisted. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
You've done a wonderful job. So thank you for talking to me
Sure.
today. This has been Daryl Ehrlich with Ray Schaak on Stories of Honor. Thanks for tuning in.